Let's go to the great state of New York, where Representative Bowman is recognized. Good morning.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. Before I get into my questions, Dr. Vasquez-Healig, is there anything you want to clarify based on questions you may have been asked before I arrived?
I'd like to clarify, there's a lot of conversation about why Credo's results are valid. I'm really surprised that they're spending so much time trying to convince us that they're valid, which to me tells a story. Now, one of the things about being at Stanford was I was subjected to a lot of statistical torture in my graduate program, and so I'd like to talk a little bit about Credo. Our understanding of that report, and only they really know, is that less than 40% of public school students are compared to more than 90% of charter school students. So it's not really a comparison of charter schools and neighborhood public schools. It's a very, and she said carefully selected, and I want to underline selected, because it's really narrow subject groups rather than actual samples. I think that's very important to say. I don't think that we should cherry pick results about educational outcomes. Also, they note in their report that they had issues with sampling, especially for Native American students and ELL students, sub 50%, and their ability to match in those areas. Also, she talked about CMOs, and they decided to omit several states that have CMOs, Ohio one of those, and 78% of the charters in Ohio are CMOs, and 1 of every 2 is for-profit. So I think it's important that I'm just really surprised that they spent a lot of time trying to justify their methodology, and I think that's because over the last 14 or 15 years that scholars have had lots of critiques of their methodology.
Thank you so much. As a former teacher, principal, and founder of a district-run public school across New York City, I've also seen countless examples of the ways that charter schools can negatively impact traditional public schools and often go against the wishes of local communities. Dr. Vasquez-Healig, how do charters impact students and communities at traditional public schools, especially as it relates to things like funding, available space, and student enrollment? Can you say more about how, as you stated in your testimony, charters often fail to align with the broader community interests?
I think this is a very important point, and I was able to make it briefly to the other gentleman, because what's happening now is we are opening charters, we're offering opportunities of vouchers, et cetera, and now we're using the same educational dollars and we're funding 3 separate systems, which is a very inefficient way of going about public education. Now, we have examples from other countries. I'll give you an example of Chile. Chile is a place where they have universal choice. And what we see in those situations is that you have your great public schools in the nice neighborhoods, you have your other public schools where most of the lower achieving and low SES students go, and then you have some private schools where those voucher students go. So what these systems actually do is they promote stratification of students. You see less special ed students being served by charter schools, you see greater segregation. When we did our study in segregation, we looked at every single school in NCES. We didn't say, here's 40% of neighborhood public schools, here's 95% of charter schools. We looked at every single school in the NCES data set and found that charters are more segregated. So I think it's very important that we are attentive to these critiques. And that's where the NAACP was coming from in 2016. There are significant critiques of charter schools, and I think charter school supporters could get a lot more people on board if they would actually address the critiques, and they haven't.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, and let's try to get this one in before time runs out. Can you also discuss in more detail the harsh discipline practices that exist more often in charter schools than in traditional public schools, and how these practices disproportionately impact marginalized students, including students with disabilities? Yeah. I mean, I've seen kids thrown yes. out of charter schools. Yes. Public schools can't yes. do that. Kids yes. suspended for long periods yes. of times. Public schools yes. can't do that. Can yes. you say more about that, please?
Yes. I think the big picture is that it really disturbs me that we spend these sort of negative aspects of charter schools, that we need to have these harsh discipline, no excuses charter schools, that it's okay that charter schools close, that it's okay that we have lower quality teachers. That's spin. But for me, as a former charter school instructor, I think of Gary. He reminded me a lot of myself, and I don't want to cry here, but he reminded me a lot of myself. He got into a little bit of trouble now and then, but one day he got into a little bit too much trouble and the charter school kicked him out. And I came back one day and Gary wasn't there and it broke my heart. So I just think about all the Garys out there who charter schools have decided that they don't want to serve and they want to send them back to our neighborhood public schools.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative Bowman. Let's stay with the great state of New York, where